Good morning. Welcome to Power Talk Live. It's a program where we combine radio and television and get to the heart of things to do with life in Jamaica. How to move your life forward, move the community, indeed, move Jamaica forward. And we're broadcasting live, as you know, on Power 106 FM and Jamaica News Network, JNN. I'm your host, Ronald Thwaites, and I'm joined by my co-host, Ralston Hammond of Real Business. And this is the bottom line. Ralston, morning, happy Easter.
Morning, how are you doing? Same to you, yours. Yes.
Good. The GDP numbers came out over the weekend.
Yes.
Now, explain what GDP numbers are for our listeners, because this is the only chance they get to really understand finance and economics, you know.
Right. Okay, while everybody was eating their buns over the weekend, starting to release the GDP numbers.
Starting the Statistical Institute, and they're the reliable people.
Yes.
Yes.
The GDP numbers measure the total value of all the final goods and services we produced during the fourth quarter of last year. So it's the total value of what we produced in the fourth quarter of last year.
So when we're talking about growth, we're talking about GDP. Up or down?
Up or down,
Good.
right.
So what's the story?
And it is measured after you adjust it for inflation. So the story that we got was in terms of the fourth quarter of 2017.
That would be October, November, December.
Right. GDP was 1.1% higher than it was during the same quarter of 2016.
Okay,
Right.
well, that sounds good.
Right. So what happened is that we saw the tourism sector growing by 5.8%, and then the other sectors within the services sector, we saw, for example, electricity and water up by 0.4%, transport, storage and communication up by 0.7%, real estate and business activities up by 0.8%, the wholesale trade 0.5%, finance and insurance services up by 0.8%, and producers of government services up by 0.2%. Now, in terms of the goods producing sector, we're talking about things like agriculture, manufacturing, construction. What we saw was that the mining sector was up by 14.7%. The reopening of the plants are coming from basically zero, so it's easier to grow rapidly. But what we saw was disappointment, manufacturing 0.3%, construction 0.1%, agriculture declined by 1.1%. Now,
that's a lower decline than it had been in previous quarters.
Yes.
But still
on the decline.
Yeah, very disappointing.
Right. Now, one of the things that we saw was that the GDP, or the value of what we produced in the fourth quarter of 2017, was less than the value of what we produced during the third quarter of 2017. So it tells us that the economy is slowing down.
Explain that again. In the third quarter, that would have been July, August, September. We grew.
We were higher.
We were higher in growth.
Yes.
than it turned out in the fourth quarter.
Yes.
Is that just a wobble of the
we
choppy
hope,
seas, or
we hope it is just a wobble.
is it a slowing down?
Yeah, so we must fix the problem. It's slowing down because of the decline that we're seeing primarily in the agricultural sector. The sector declined for 3 quarters last year. Hence, we saw the ministerial changes. One of the things that we saw coming out of the ministerial changes is a good look on today's paper. If you look at the front page of today's paper, where Minister Shaw has made a very good first shot, we're saying that the 2 billion...
Leave the coconut board
Yes.
with their money so they can reinvest,
Yes.
rather than seek to take it away.
Precisely.
Something that has been a matter of ambivalence
Yes.
in both administrations,
Right.
the previous one
Yes.
and this one.
Yes.
I completely applaud this.
Yes, right.
Yes.
Now,
And now we must hold the coconut growers and the government
Yes.
in order to ensure that that money
Is
isn't
used
locked
for
up again, as it has been for a long
Right.
time, to good advantage it
Yes.
turns out, but is now used in the productive sector,
precisely.
in the good sector,
Yes.
as capital investment
Yes.
for the millions of coconut trees we need to be planting.
Precisely, and they have a plan to plant. So
Yeah.
that's a good look. So we hope it is used for that purpose, because we import 1.5 billion annually in coconut-related products, and there'll be a big decline in coconut production planting elsewhere.
Yeah, so we can have overseas markets
Right.
earn foreign exchange.
Yeah.
So that's good.
So that would be a big shot for agriculture. I would like to see the minister follow that up now with expanding and accelerating the process of land reform and land titling.
Well, there's another very clear thing, as
Yes.
Christopher Gentles would have told us were
Yes.
he available today,
Yes.
and that is the capacity of the industry to produce seedlings for
Yes,
planting
precisely.
is too low.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
If you go to them and say, I want to plant 100 acres of coconuts now,
Yes.
please may I have the seedlings?
Yes.
Yes? Which they normally provide free.
Yes.
But even if you say, I'll pay for them,
Right.
they can't supply
They can't
them.
supply it. Right.
Yes.
Right.
And therefore, the nurseries have to be expanded. That will cost money.
Precisely.
The scientific and technological
Yes.
work that needs to be done
Yes.
to accelerate the availability of seedlings,
Yes.
as well as at the same time carrying on with the pest and disease
Yes.
and the varietal research
Yes.
has to go on apace.
Right.
And that is valid, useful investment.
Precisely. Precisely. So we expect that to lead to an expansion of agricultural output. We want that to be followed up, as we said before, with more lands, more titles, because that will provide more capital for the sector, improvements in the availability of credit in order to ensure that the sector is returned to a full growth path, which is important if GDP is going to go forward. Additionally, what we've seen, despite the fact that you see all of these cranes going up and people are talking about a boom in the construction sector, the sector only grew by 0.7%, which tells you that
surprising.
the value added of the, precisely, which tells you that the value added of the sector is extremely low. So we need to be looking at the whole system of work permits. We need to be looking at the kind of personnel we're getting to work with the sector in terms of our people, training our people so that they can take bigger jobs in the sector in order
So
to...
when we get outside people to do the building,
Yes.
and we have to import a tremendous amount of the
Precisely.
inputs in the building,
Precisely.
the net effect on growth,
Yes.
both in terms of labor
Yes.
and in terms of local
Is
services
extremely
purchases,
limited.
is very limited.
Precisely.
So we have to bear that in mind.
Precisely.
Stop the euphoria
Yes.
and start being realistic.
Precisely.
But I need to ask you,
Yes.
if we've grown 1.1 in the last quarter, annually, what does that work out to be?
Well, annually we're coming down, as we said, 0.5, between 0.5 and 0.9%, because remember we weren't growing in the previous quarters.
Okay?
Yes.
So we are still suffering from what doctors would call anemia.
Anemia.
Yeah,
Yes.
the blood is weak.
Yes.
The growth elixir is not what it should be.
Yes.
Okay, so we're glad for this.
Yes.
But unfortunately, it is a step down from the third quarter.
Precisely.
And despite the shoot up in mining,
Yes.
and which is not likely to continue
Right.
at the same level.
No,
We
because
hope
they're
it will
coming
grow.
from almost zero.
Sure,
Yeah.
and therefore the trajectory has to be to look at those areas, such as we've been
Precisely.
enunciating,
Yes.
coconuts, that can sustain the growth
Yes.
going forward.
Precisely. Right. Manufacturing, again, the numbers are telling us about the weak link. So if you look at it, 5.8% in tourism, 11.7% in mining. But if you look at manufacturing, 0.3%. So it tells you again that the value added and the linkage of the manufacturing sector with the rest of the economy are extremely weak. So we need to be looking at that again to the manufacturing sector. Metro said they need like $1 billion in capital at 4%. Agriculture needs the same thing. If we are really going to get them to be connected with the rest of the sectors.
Okay, let's look at tourism for a little though.
Yeah.
You said 5+% growth.
5.8% in
Now,
the fourth quarter. of
is
last
that
year.
net or is that gross?
That's gross.
That's gross.
Right.
So the which is fine,
Right.
but we don't keep all of that.
Precisely. That's
Yes,
the point.
and
Right.
therefore that figure needs interpretation.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. We can't keep all of it if you do not improve manufacturing.
Unless you have the linkage with
Precisely.
the manufacturing and agriculture and
Yes.
other services.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So these figures are helpful,
Yes.
but they don't necessarily tell the whole story
No.
unless we parse it and shred it in the
Precisely.
way that you are doing.
Precisely.
Okay.
Precisely. And it tells you the policies that you need to pursue if you are going to get a better result.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, is the fourth quarter normally the best quarter of the year? Is there a cyclical aspect to these figures that you would like to
No,
point
the fourth
out?
quarter is normally the best quarter, so that is why Statin has written down the entire growth year for the calendar year to 0.4% because we got
0.4%?
0.5.
5.
Yeah, to 0.9. We're going to come out at less than 1% because remember we had,
That is for the fiscal year.
yeah, and for the calendar year 0.5. Remember we had 3 bad quarters before we approached the fourth quarter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We barely escaped the recession.
as we reported on this program.
Right.
Well, in that case, then we have to look very carefully at where we go from here.
Precisely.
And monitor. But things are 1.1% for the quarter is a shot in the arm.
Right.
Even if it doesn't indicate overall health.
But remember, you're measuring that against last year. No,
Well, this is it. And last year was nothing to write home about.
Precisely.
And therefore, when you do this, you have all our listeners and our viewers need to be fully aware of the background of this, the context.
Yes.
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 We need 4, 5, 6%.
Yes.
Year over year over year,
Precisely.
if we are going to offer a better, if Jamaica, the enterprise Jamaica, is going to offer a better standard of living, a better hope and prospect.
Right.
Again, this morning, I'm just passing and watching at the day barely dawn at the scores of people lining up to go to America.
Yes.
We know that some perhaps are going for a business or vacation, but the majority of them are voting against Jamaica.
Yes.
That's the truth.
Yes.
Yes? Many of them who go on the pretext of coming back don't come to their own peril, because what Mr. Trump is now saying about the dreamers is ought to put pause to anybody about to buy a ticket and think they can go up there and disappear among the teeming masses around the Statue of Liberty.
Yes.
It doesn't work anymore, or it won't work anymore.
Precisely.
So we need, from the narrow base that we have,
to step up the pace.
to step up.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. Right.
In that regard, you mentioned the various needs, for example, of manufacture and agriculture. My view is agriculture needs $5 billion at 4%.
Yes.
And it's possible.
Yes.
The same way we've offered it to tourism, we ought to be able to offer it to them on proper terms.
And if you do the land titling process, you also
add strength to the credit process, which is indeed the important element.
Yes.
So these are the kind of things that we need to make budget priorities of.
Precisely.
And even off budget, we have developmental institutions that are available to assist in this regard.
Right.
So that's a priority that we want to invite our listeners and viewers to insist to their political representatives. Yes, that they must see to it that this money is made available.
Yes.
That's what you're there for.
Yes. Yes.
Not just to suck up to government or to chronically oppose them, but rather to come forward with clear, valid arguments as to how the various sectors of the economy, particularly those that are most amenable, can in fact be improved.
Precisely. So a new finance minister takes over at a time when the economy is weakening. His job is to halt the decline and to accelerate growth.
I suspect that they will interpret this as being nothing more than a cyclical bump.
Well,
but then you can only justify that by looking forward into this quarter, which is at an end now, January, February, March, and seeing how the preliminary figures work out.
But they've already worked that, and that is why the minister says that for the fiscal year, the growth will be 0.9%. They've already projected that.
Well, we're into the second quarter now. Today is the 3rd of April, isn't it?
Yes.
And therefore, we need to be clear what steps are being taken. Right. We appreciate the one about the coconut industry.
Yes, Minister Shaw's move was a good move.
Very good. Yes. Now, it's something that we had promoted.
Yes.
Heavily.
So he's listening.
And it is critical that we should look for other arenas. The agricultural shows over the weekend were good. They always, but a lot of good earnest. But frankly, from the reports I have got, the exhibits were so-so. Yeah? No, we have to go beyond that.
Yes, because production is on a strain. Yes.
The capacity for producing, it involves a mindset.
Yes.
It involves a reset of financial priorities.
Yes.
In extremely significant ways.
Precisely.
You will understand my particular bent to see that more and more of what we feed to school children is locally based and is grown. And I think that in the various communities, particularly in the rural areas, but also in the urban areas, what you can spend on that's going to be able to feed your children nutritiously and appropriately, rather than simply buying stuff from foreign and doing what you always have done, which has produced drain on foreign exchange, a lack of productive initiative, and obesity. Yes, and still a great deal of hungry belly. Yes, those things don't work anymore, and you can't change it all at once. But if you were able to move the perhaps $8 billion a year that is spent on school feeding into the agricultural sector, or any significant part of that,
yes.
can you imagine the
yes.
increase in aggregate demand,
yes.
in rural
right.
upliftment?
And manufacturing, yes.
Indeed.
Yes.
Yes.
You're
and
right.
what I would love to see is a segment, let's call them out, from Jamaica producers to the Jamaica broilers, Caribbean broilers,
yes.
The various aggregators of primary produce,
yes.
together
Group, yes.
To say, how are we going to produce an affordable, available dietary regimen for our little children right up to secondary school.
Yes.
And we're going to do it large, even if it costs us some more.
Yes.
It would be worthwhile.
Yes, and we'll be saving foreign exchange. The trade deficit for the January again was declined by 8%, was up 8% compared to January of 2017.
So we're spending more foreign exchange than we're earning.
Yes.
In the goods producing sector,
yes.
and not worrying about it because we make it up somehow.
Yes.
But that cannot be a sustainable situation.
Right.
We'll take a short break. On the bottom line, we continue when we come back. Welcome back to Power Talk Live. We're on the bottom line on Power 106 and JNN Jamaica News Network. Raston Hamill of Real Business joins me. So Raston, the Gleaner has it this morning, the report that Jamaicans are saving too little.
Yes.
And indeed making insufficient provision for their pensionable years.
Yes.
When you last told me, perhaps only 10% of Jamaicans, I understood,
yes.
of Jamaican workers
yes.
are involved in a structured pension plan.
Correct.
So that would mean that the other 90% of workers
yes.
are not. They would be relying on NIS, National Insurance.
Yes. Yes.
While their dependents, who make up the remainder of the population, are unprotected entirely.
Precisely.
What's the answer to that? How can we inject prudence, a culture of saving, long-term savings, which will, of course, ease our dependence on all kinds of foreign sources to which we become addicted and think we are entitled when we're not.
Right.
And secondly, how will it help us to move to a context of development from one of consumption?
Yes. Well, first thing, we have to change the narrative. Our people is about consumption. So at the leadership level, because Jamaica's fundamental economic problem, this is not a new problem, this is a problem that is deteriorating. Jamaica's fundamental economic problem is overconsumption and underproduction. And the debt is a manifestation of that problem. So we talk about...
Which of our political leaders, and you know my own affiliation, which of our political leaders is brave enough to tell the people of Jamaica that is the case? Yes. And it's a hard lesson, and it must be nuanced as you speak it, because there are some people who, for whom it describes accurately their lifestyle.
Precisely.
There are others who will look at you and say, what am I to do? I'm consuming 95% of my income on food, on transportation. You want me to stop?
Okay. Well, that is why we're saying, well, this is a macro problem. At the macro level, we are over-consuming and under-producing, and that is why the IMF is here, because the main objective of the IMF program is debt reduction, because the debt is a manifestation of the overconsumption and underproduction, because you borrow in order
to live.
In order to live.
Trust.
Right. So what we're seeing is that the debt is coming down, but those who are required to bear most of the sacrifice in terms of the debt coming down are those who can least afford it, those who are really over-consuming. They are the ones that are not being impacted directly by the debt reduction. So what we need to do, we need to grow the economy faster and in a more equitable way. Because one of the reasons for people not focusing on pensions and those things is because they are focusing on now. So while we try to change the culture and tell them that it's good to save and they must save for their future, at the same time, you'll have to ensure that economic conditions are improving and that their real incomes, that is the difference between what they are getting and what their money can buy, are being improved. So we need to improve the process of education. We need to grow in a more inclusive way.
You know, I'm going to contest you a little bit on this.
Okay.
Because you say improve the process of education. The public of this country are being educated fulsomely by every advertisement that comes out advertising the $20 million car, the $500 breakfast,
Yes.
The $50,000 carnival,
Right.
whatever have you. Now these are things that are these are clearly educational, perhaps not in the way that you are
They're
meaning
educated to consume.
They're educated to consume.
That's the point I'm making.
Yeah.
So if overconsumption is our problem,
The same stupidness we do, I heard the other night on television. I'm really sorry to use, but I must use sharp language, where we are being we're being encouraged by the Ministry of Health and Jamaica Moves and
Yes.
Heart Foundation to be careful about the sugar
Yes.
intake for our health purposes. And the very next advertisement, without skipping a breath, is to extol the value of sugar.
Yes.
Now what the heck is that? When you send to ordinary people,
Right.
like me, a conflicting message like that,
Yes.
I have to disaggregate it.
Yes.
I may not do so.
Right.
I may just say, Chuck, I'll carry on because these people don't know what signal they're sending.
Right.
So the whole bent of our culture, in terms of media, in terms of all the other stimuli, sometimes gets very confusing.
Certainly. So again, it comes back to the situation where rights and responsibilities must travel together. So while we're educating our people about consumption, we must also be educating them that overconsumption is our real problem. That is why we're carrying this massive debt. The need to pay down this massive debt is the reason for you not being able to get some of the things that you say you want in terms of infrastructure and all of those things. So I'm saying it's a process where education, we have to kind of change the narrative in terms of all about consumption. The good life is about consumption. We have to tell our people the importance of savings for the future, while at the same time use those savings in order to ensure that we have accelerated and inclusive growth so that our people are getting a livable wage so that they can think about saving some more, because it is the difference between your income and your needs that lead to the savings. If we have a situation where, as you say, people spending 95 and 99% of their income on basic consumption and then have to borrow in order to survive for the rest of the month,
Isn't there
going to have a problem?
Isn't there another dynamic that is present though? Because there is in the mind of a number of people, not just the concept, but the observation and sometimes the painful reality that if you hold on to your money, it's going to diminish.
Yes.
It's going to devalue.
Yes.
It's going to be ravaged by inflation.
Right.
And therefore, boy, we better adopt the attitude, eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow you die.
Right. That is why we're saying policies, sustainable policies that lead to that kind of change in terms of improving real incomes, in terms of improving real living standards. So while you're educating the people about that, you'll have to be doing them so that they're feeling it on the ground.
Well, our inflation rate has dropped precipitously over the past several years, but it is still significant.
Yes.
What's it going to be this year? Five and a half?
Yeah, 5.2, 5.5.
Okay, so you have to take that into account. The public servants have apparently forgotten that in their wage settlement to what is going to be their own detriment. But they have to live with the choices their leaders have made for them. I don't think they can reverse it at this stage. But that being the case, you have inflation, devaluation, which used to be quite a scourge because of the high import content of ordinary life. Foodstuffs, fuel, etc. That seems to have stabilized to some extent, which is good. These are good things.
Right direction to move in.
Yes. And you do that by establishing the fundamentals over a period of time. Yes. But still, the heavy trade imbalance, and the proclivity to live on other people's means and other people's goods has to change. And you can do that in a variety of different ways. We were talking earlier of how you can modify people's dietary preferences. You can, if for example we had a really decent public transportation system,
that will help
rural and urban, that would end a whole lot of the diarrhea of spending on used cars and fuel. By the way, have you been on Marcus Garvey Drive recently? Yes? Marcus Garvey Drive with a collection of cars there, presumably waiting to be disgorged on the market. That to me, that is an open sore that describes the trade deficit that you continually regale us on. This is putting it into actual what you can see,
Yes.
not just numbers that you can quote.
Yes.
And if we continue to do this, the situation can only get worse, even as people think it's getting better,
Precisely.
because they are able to own a $500,000
Yes,
car.
because they're taking a micro look. They're not looking at the macroeconomic situation.
But neither are the financial institutions,
No,
sir.
neither the authorities.
Yeah. And then we have the crush and the cramp
Precisely.
in other areas,
Yes.
when in fact this is the sources of it.
Yes. Yeah.
So, indeed, Jamaica needs a radical shift in its priorities,
Precisely.
in order to be able to concentrate, as other nations do,
Fundamentally.
without prejudice to their happiness, in fact, for the enhancement of their happiness.
Precisely.
Yes?
Another problem in relation to the pensions, Ronnie, the system that we have in terms of what we see happening in the public and the private sector frequently of contract working is also not conducive to the accumulation of pensions.
You know, I'm looking for a statistic.
Yes.
What proportion of the workforce is in fact on this contract labor?
Yes.
I suspect it is probably in advance of 20%.
We hear that it's about 35%.
Well,
yeah, that's a significant portion.
I'm informed by you.
Yeah.
No, that is a huge portion.
Yes, yes.
And that person, let our listeners know, by definition doesn't have a pension.
No, no.
That person there's nothing taken out of their salary
Yes.
in order for pension.
Precisely.
They must make the return if they want to contribute even
Precisely.
to NIS.
Yes.
And many of them,
Yes.
given the rates and given the pressures,
Yes.
don't do so.
No.
And as a consequence, when they turn 60, 70,
Yes.
they are faced with a necessitous
Right.
situation,
Yes.
which cannot in fact be relieved by any public source alone.
Precisely.
So therefore, we need something more mandatory by way of a pension scheme.
Yes.
And can you tell me, retired chairman of the National Insurance Fund, why we are still putting these unnecessary caps on people's contribution to the NIS?
Well, all those things have been dealt with in an actuarial review, and we wonder why is it that they have not been implemented over the last 2 years, because recommendations were made in that regard by the actuaries, and none of those things have been implemented over the last 2
Well,
years.
I don't understand fully the workings of that scheme, as you would. But surely if we want to alleviate the crisis that the Gleaner reports on page 3 this morning
Yes.
about low savings. And by the way, we're comparing this, for example, to places like South Korea
Yes.
and Japan.
Chile and those
yes,
places,
whi-
yes.
which save almost up to half
Yes. That's
of,
why they're
of
productive.
their earnings.
Yes.
Yes, that's why they can grow,
Yes.
and that's why they probably don't have the
Precisely.
level of debt,
That we
national
have.
debt,
Precisely.
that we do.
Precisely.
Now, in
Different
those
culture.
yeah,
Yes.
in those circumstances, that involves some very psychological and spiritual values. You know,
Yes.
it involves things like postponement,
Correct.
self-control,
Yes.
modesty.
Yes.
Okay.
Frugality. Yes.
Indeed.
Yes.
Now, in those circumstances, we need to have a situation where we encourage people to save, not put a cap on them, say you can't put any more than
Precisely.
this,
We agree. And that
and to give them incentives.
Yes.
Claudette Crooks is right.
Yes.
For long-term savings. Tax-free if you leave it for 5 years is good,
Yes.
but perhaps we need to advance that.
Yes.
And make sure that we are, in fact, not placing ourselves with what is happening in America right now,
Yes.
even with their far more advanced systems of pensions,
Correct.
where their social security system is likely to run bankrupt.
Precisely. Precisely. So we want those recommendations. The recommendations were made by the actuaries, and for 2 years, none of them have been implemented. So we await the decision of that minister in terms of implementing the recommendations made by the actuaries 2 year or the new actuarial review that they're doing, because it made all of those recommendations to deal with those problems.
Well, let's certainly seek to that, and
Right.
in order just to fill out the picture.
Yes.
It will take some time to develop in all detail,
Yes.
but we need to start in this year, 2018, a national health insurance.
Right.
Yes?
Correct.
I attended a clinic a few days ago and watched a parent who was desperately interested in their little child's health.
Yes.
A child obviously ill, don't think life-threatening, but certainly life-compromising, and simply, with the best will in the world, being unable to manage a $13,000 prescription.
Right.
Now you have to, this is not an unusual situation.
Yes.
It happens again and again
yes.
and again.
Young and the old.
Young and the old.
Yes.
The old just resign themselves to discomfort and early death.
Yes.
It's better than it used to be. The National Health Fund is a tremendous assistance,
Right.
and they're very efficient too, I'm told. But the capacity to cover cannot be done from budgetary sources alone or from other state sources. It has to be done by personal contribution. It is part of what you put aside to save.
Right. Which brings us to the point, Ronnie, while we need to improve the amounts that we are saving, we also need to use our savings properly. And we do not believe that the current savings that we have are being used properly.
When we come back from the break, we're going to extend the bottom line. These are important subjects because when we look at the way we use long-term savings in Jamaica, which is Ralston's next topic, after that, it wouldn't be fair to you if we didn't look at the trade war that's looming between the United States and indeed the rest of the world, and particularly China. The bottom line is the place where you get the best discussion on economic and financial matters. This is Power Talk Live, and we soon come. Extending the bottom line this morning on Power Talk Live at 10:45, Damion Crwaford, the senator, will join us. He has some concerns about the number of young men detained in St. James under the state of emergency. Ralston Hyman, are we using our long-term savings prudently?
No, I doubt it. I don't believe that we're using our entire savings prudently, because when we look at what is happening, the economy is weakening. For the new finance minister to get the economy on track, apart from the work that will have to be done in terms of the agricultural sector by Minister Shaw, the work that will have to be done by Dr. Chang in terms of dealing with crime, all of which are constraints on the economy, in terms of the work that will have to be done by Minister Montague in terms of transportation. The finance minister, apart from restructuring the public service, has the important task of ensuring that our savings are being used productively. You can't restructure the public service in an economy that is stagnating or an economy that is weakening. You'll have to do that in a strong economy, which means that we'll have to be using our savings better. When we look at the numbers, we just spoke about the cars and all of those things which are weakening the economy at the macro level, despite the fact that at the micro level people feel more comfortable driving their own cars. You can't have that in a situation where the banking sector, which had some 892 billion on deposits, that's a part of the country's savings, and 60 billion at that time was held by the Bank of Jamaica, so there was $832 billion funding these cars at 6% while they are funding production at 14%. It doesn't square because the cars come with foreign exchange commitments. Therefore, in a prudent economy, we'd have to ensure that those foreign exchange commitments can be met without having to borrow from external sources which we have no control over, which means that we need to see more of our savings going to agriculture, going to manufacturing, going to construction at rates that are affordable.
Yeah, but they would argue that the risks are too high. Oh. The car you can always repossess, and there's always somebody else yearning to have one, so you can sell it to him.
Yes.
That's the argument.
And every time you sell, you have to sell at a lower price because of the backing up in terms of supply. Well, is that a productive use of the country?
Clearly not. Right. Clearly not. But there is this argument that risk is intense if you're going into particularly agriculture and also to manufacture.
Yes.
Now, it seems to me there have to be compensating measures that can apply there. Right. But the direction is ineluctable. You have to do it. Precisely. Otherwise, you will simply spend yourself into another period of distress and oblivion.
That's the point. That's the point. So we'll have to find a way to mitigate these risks, because if you continue with the massive importation of cars, run these massive trade deficits, you're getting into more and more debt. If you can't find yourself in a situation where you improve the earnings from the tourism sector, you can't improve the earnings from the tourism sector without the linkages with the agricultural sector. You're not going to get those linkages if agriculture has no funding with which to go up market and to become more scientific. So
well, as you pointed out, the blip in mining and the steady increase in tourism is the only really growth factors of the economy, evidenced by this fourth quarter
Yes.
resulting.
Yes.
But tell me though, in terms of pension funds in Jamaica,
Yes.
the argument is that there are some very restrictive rubrics
Yes.
as far as their investment is concerned,
Yes.
which ties them down and makes them unavailable for development.
Yes.
Is that so?
One of the things that we saw when we went to the National Insurance Fund is that more than 70% of the money was tied up in government of Jamaica securities. And that is why the insurance fund took such a heavy beating when we had to have those
debt exchanges.
So I agree that we need to look at the regulations related to these pension funds so that these monies can be freed up for development. Additionally, in freeing up these regulations, we must also ensure that there's a certain degree of prudence because this is pension money. We do not want pension money to be used willy-nilly, but we also do not want pension money to be just stuck in low interest yielding government of Jamaica securities.
Well,
we want it to be used to fund infrastructure and to fund the economy.
Yeah, the need for what was effectively budget support.
Yes.
By the various pension funds, the National Housing Trust funds,
yes.
and many other public agencies who had capital.
Yes.
That is now receding.
Precisely.
That is a fruit of the stabilization process.
Precisely.
Those institutions, the government doesn't need to have those
at this particular
anymore.
point in time.
This was why some of us were so chagrined when the government decided to continue taking the money from the housing trust.
Right.
Because what that means is that the pension funds, include the housing trust and other such agencies, yes, who either are induced or are constrained to contribute
yes.
to the budget, have less money to invest in the real sector.
Yes, in the things that they are supposed to
Yeah.
do.
Now,
yeah.
if in fact that is the case, there's less of a demand,
Yes.
then the moment is opportune
Yes.
for the people of this country,
Yes.
those viewing Power Talk Live, those listening, to start to put pressure on the government to say, spend money, direct money towards viable infrastructural long-term projects.
Correct.
That's, and what are you talking about? You're talking about roads,
Yes.
bridges,
Yes.
ports,
Yes.
all of these
Yes.
these different things,
Yes.
factory space,
Yes. Yes. Those things.
agricultural infrastructure,
Yeah.
and there you are.
Right.
Thanks
Those
for-
are the big ticket items that are going to build out the economy. One more point though, Ronnie. One of the things that we are seeing, which we believe is totally unacceptable. We spoke, another thing that came out over the weekend, Susan Stanley, Executive Director of the Jamaica Environment Trust,
Yeah,
says that the Tourism Enhancement Fund,
yeah.
say the IMF told them that they must stop funding the No Dirty Up Jamaica program because the money should go to the consolidated fund.
Would the IMF have done that?
Well, I would find that quite a stretch, and if the IMF came to us with that, that is an argument that could be easily rejected. So we find it strange that Dr. Kerry Wallace, the head of the TF, would tell Susan Stanley that the IMF says that they mustn't fund the program anymore.
Well, I was hoping that we could have had Dr. Wallace.
Yes.
I don't know what
Yes.
he's a doctor of,
Yes.
but Dr. Wallace on the program this morning.
Yes.
Because that is egregious.
Yes.
Isn't there an argument though? You're using what should be used in very prudent fashion
Yes.
to make up for what is a chronic and, in my view, inexcusable shortfall of funds to do normal things like cleaning up the communities.
Okay. Well, the money from the tourism enhancement
If
fund.
you're using it for education,
Yes.
yes, as the No Dirty Up Jamaica program
Yes.
involved,
Yes.
then I can understand that.
Precisely.
And you use it for a particular period of
Yes,
time.
yes.
But there is no explanation for the fact that we continue to underfund National Solid Waste Management.
yes.
And I must once again repeat that I'm against NSWMA having the responsibility. It should be the monitoring agency. It is the municipal councils
Yes.
that ought to have responsibility for
Yes.
public cleansing,
Yes.
and they should be held accountable.
Yes.
The argument is that they can't be because they will all give fish head and corruption will take it over.
Yes.
But frankly, yes, I'm a supporter of local government, but if they can't take on that responsibility at this stage of our national life
it
and
makes
do
no
it
sense.
properly, then Mr. Siaga would have been right. They should be left with the cemeteries and
Yeah.
even those.
Yeah.
That's nonsense.
Yeah.
Okay? So people have to come to accept the responsibility which goes with their office.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And perform.
Yeah, but the way in which we use the Tourism Enhancement Fund is a subject for the bottom line on another occasion.
Right, right. So, I mean, the sustainability of the sector is important. I believe the education process, no doubt yet Jamaica, is important at this particular point in time.
Some of us haven't got accustomed to the fact you can't expect continued growth in the tourism sector with a nasty community.
Precisely, that's the point.
Yes, and everybody wants the benefit of tourism.
Yeah.
But then when you discard your garbage in the gully and the North Gully comes down and flood up Montego Bay and the beaches get polluted and the corals die, it's your concern too. You caused it.
Yeah.
That's what we have to understand. The assumption of personal responsibility for national issues, albeit in the microcosm, is critical for us to go forward.
Very important.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
The bottom line this morning, we'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll be joined by Opposition Senator Damion Crwaford, as he is concerned about the number of young people being detained under the state of emergency in St. James. Who else do they have to talk for them? It's good that we're going to hear from him. Later on in the program, Yulit Gordon of the Jamaica Cancer Society joins us. Why aren't we offering full cervical cancer screening for all our women in Jamaica? Do you know how much suffering that could ease? We'll ask her the question and get the answer too, I'm sure. Soon come back. Welcome back to Power Talk Live on Power 106 FM and Jamaica News Network. Ralston Hammond and I are now joined by Opposition Senator Damion Crwaford. You know, Ralston, the Senate is never a dull place. Yes? Morning, Damion.
Morning, man.
I'm fine, thanks. And thanks for your liberty in the Senate. Yeah. Between you and Lambert Brown, and on the other side, Mrs. Johnson Smith, and one or two of the others, well, not to mention KD Knight.
Yes.
That is constant theater. Seriously though, the Senate is a review chamber, and it needs a kind of extended and mature discussion on national issues. What's your concern about the state of emergency?
Well, first, let me just speak to the Senate, because I was also in the lower house.
Yes.
And the difference between the Senate and the lower house is it allows for even those in support of the government to have a say. Remember, some of the rules in the lower house don't allow you to speak on your minister's bills, etc., etc. So therefore, it gives less robust conversation.
Which is a whole lot of stupidness.
Right. Yes. Now, as it relates to the state of emergency, in particular the emergency powers, what has been happening is that it has reflected what was a stop and frisk in the United States, in New York, where there's a targeting of a single demographic. Jamaicans feel that because we are not racist, we have no prejudice, which is not so. Prejudice is against a demographic. Race is only one of which. We call bias against women, for example, is a prejudice. Bias against religions is a prejudice. And bias against a socioeconomic group is also a prejudice. And so what we have found, for example, 1,300 persons have been detained. And we know the situations that exist within these detention centers. In fact, if we just go back to Maria Dean, we know what the possibilities are in the detention centers.
Ghana Barrett.
Now, right. Yeah. So 1,300 have been detained, of which 61 have been charged.
Hold on, no, doctor. 1,000 plus detained.
Yes.
Young black men.
In particular, poor men.
Poor men.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So anyway, in a state of emergency, if you fit that, what you call demographic, that profile, yes, you have to be, you are likely to be picked up with or without reason, put through something called process, yes, and miss your job, get a bad name, we never know you were involved with something. If you weren't involved with something, why police pick you up? Yes. Well, then for process, no man, can't do that. Step out. You can't qualify for this again. All right. And 60 odd?
61.
61.
Has been charged.
And out of 1,300, yes.
So therefore, that suggests 5%, which shows that there is no logic, there is no intelligence behind it other than just a profile.
But remember what the Prime Minister told us. Yes. The Prime Minister at the outset told us that this would not be net fishing, it would be spear fishing. I
It's
remember
net
his
fishing.
words.
Well,
but this,
This is net fishing.
the results are quite the contrary.
Yes.
Well, the Prime Minister has said many things, but the results are contrary.
Yes.
And when you look at what the judge said in New York against to say that it was unconstitutional for the stop and frisk, they said it is not wrong for the police to stop persons, but it is wrong for a 2% hit rate, meaning 2% of those who you stop are actually found to be of reasonable cause.
Yeah.
Now, that 2% hit rate was exaggerated by the fact that they were of the majority a certain demographic, black and Hispanic.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing that is happening here. Now, you'll find a Jamaican to say Trump is a bad person if that happened in New York.
Yes.
But they don't say the same thing when it happened
Jamaica.
in Jamaica.
Yeah.
So now, Ronnie, you made an excellent point, because a lot of the jobs these young men have are transient jobs. For example, they work on a construction site. You don't show up today.
Yeah.
They are replaced by 500 people who are outside waiting.
Yeah.
And so you don't get to be replaced or returned because that happens. It also then now categorize a community as a risky employing community, because the boss is saying my person might not show up in certain situations, so therefore I will avoid employing from these particular.
So it reinforces the age-old prejudice about certain geographical areas.
Yeah. Now, why am I against that?
Yes.
Because a minority group cannot define a community.
Yes.
So when we say it's a criminal community,
Yes.
right, you're saying that the majority of the people in the community are not criminals.
Yes.
It's the same way if you say Jamaica is a white country.
Yeah, man.
Jamaica is not a white country because the majority of us are black.
Yeah.
So therefore, to say that Tivoli Garden is a criminal community, or Montego Bay is a criminal space, Flankers is a criminal community, you're saying the majority are criminals.
Yeah.
You're defining the community by the minority.
Yes.
And that prejudice has caused for the approach that we have accepted.
But your argument too fine. There's crime in St. James, around Montego Bay, around these communities. The country is suffering in every way. Ralston Hammond will tell you, what is it, 6% of GDP we're losing because of murder. And you are into these arguments about profiling communities and profiling youth. Sorry we have to do that, you know, man, but the circumstance called for it. And if some of them have to dead, let them dead too.
Well, that is also...
Yeah, well, that was one of the countervailing arguments.
And equally untrue.
Yes,
Let us express how it's untrue.
Yes.
The state of emergency currently, there are 3 things happening in Montego Bay.
I really better say I'm playing devil's advocate.
I know that. Now, there are 3 things happening in Montego Bay. One, there's a curtailing of movement through a curfew. There's an influx of police officers and active security forces, and there is the emergency powers. Those are the 3 things that are happening. Now, the curtailing of movement through curfew and the influx of security persons don't need a state of emergency. Now, simultaneously in Dedham town, there is the curtailing of movement and there is an influx of security persons without the emergency powers. Now, both places have seen a reduction in murder.
Right.
So therefore, the emergency powers have proven itself not to be the variable that has caused for the outcome which we desire, which is a reduction in murder.
The inflow of security persons.
Is the inflow of security, active security, and the curtailing of movement. Now, because we're fearful, we're unlikely to be logical. And that is being played upon by a government that wants to see tough on crime, which means they go to the most extreme,
drastic,
and a opposition that don't want to be seen as the resisting fighting crime.
No, but on the contrary, the opposition has been calling for the government to become more tougher on crime. How can you be saying what you're saying?
Well, if you're saying tougher on crime, then you must be saying on a criminal, not on a community. Because 100% of crimes are committed by criminals. So therefore, if we had a targeted approach to go after a criminal, to identify this person, to say he's an enemy of the state, to possibly remove some of his rights, such as facing your accuser, such as being tried in front of jury, such as, for example, in some places, 3 judges... Sorry?
Not going with you there, but make your point.
Yes, but what I'm saying is, the targeting of an individual,
you
can be tough on targeting the individual.
You have to be more intelligence-driven.
But that means that you must identify the individual. Now, what is the number one fallacy that we have going on? We are targeting, quote-unquote, the holders of the gun and not targeting the owners of the gun. Because 99.7%, I understand, of persons who have been detained in Montego Bay are from the inner city. Now, remember when we were hunting Dodos? It was East Kirklandites that they thought that he was located. And when they found him, it was not in Tivoli Gardens, though the Tivoli Gardens people died. So the reality of the situation is that there is, in my mind, a effort to turn off the pipe and claim that the water gone.
Yes.
When all you need, because you have not gone for
fundamental
the more
effort.
fundamental effort. And the United States themselves suggested that the lack of the kingpins being arrested is one of the bases for Jamaica's criminal system.
So what
we saw that coming out of the Narcotics International Strategy Control. Yes, yes.
So then the very imposition of severe measures, you say, is done in a classist fashion.
And based on a classist prejudice. A prejudice that we have all accepted.
Yes.
Because, Ronnie, when we say that poverty causes crime, the causality has two variables that it must observe. One, it must have shared direction, meaning if poverty go up, crime should go up. If poverty go down, crime should go down.
Right.
And it must have majority outcome, which means that most poor people should be criminals. Now, as I said in the Senate, if I should attribute every single murder to a different criminal, we have 1,600 murderers.
Yes.
Now, we also have 500,000 people living below the poverty line.
Yes.
Proven poor.
Yes.
So that is less than 0.1%
yes.
of those quote-unquote poor.
Well, I have heard the argument that poverty causes crime. I've heard the argument persuasively that it is a contributant.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Which is a different point.
From
no. The question to a correlation now is what is the direction of the correlation?
Yes.
Because what poverty does is to cause for you to have less to lose and carry out the intent of criminal activity.
Precisely.
But it doesn't create the intent.
Yes.
It causes for example, if I see a person and I say, I'll thump that person in the face, I have too much to lose. I have a family, I have a house, I have a job, I have too much to lose.
Yes.
Now the person with equal intent that have less to lose may now take that because he have less risk.
Which means we have to improve the social and economic
conditions. You must create a situation where persons have more to lose between the intent and the carrying out of the intent. Right. In marketing, we say between intent and action.
Yeah, right.
So therefore, we have, in my mind, facilitated a prejudice to suggest that it is the state of poverty that has led to the intent, more so than the individual's mind that exists in every society, every demographic, but might perceive more risk and therefore less likely to carry out the action based on the intent.
I think a lot of the NRA people in the United States are of the same mind as many of our rebel youth,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah? A carelessness about life, a desperateness born of whatever source, that leads them to see violence and the annihilation of someone else as a consequence, as a basis for their own self-upliftment.
Well, Ronnie, let us look at what they suggest, that they perceive that one criminal is likely to commit 4 crimes on average, which means that we have in Jamaica a total about 400 criminals. So when you say youth, it is again an exaggeration of how many are participating in this particular particular murder. Now, what they have perceived is that those who are participating in murder don't face the risk of being caught nor being convicted. Yeah. And so because there is no risk, then the intent is carried out into action.
Yeah.
By the way,
that's a fundamental point.
The statistics over the weekend indicated a higher level of convictions for those who were tried for murder and serious crime in the circuit courts, but it didn't, as far as I know, take into account what's happening in the gun court, where the conviction rate is extremely low, and reinforces the point that you both were making. When we come back on the bottom line, what was it that Damien's uncle, his blood uncle, Senator Ransford Braham, in the Senate had as rejoinder to Senator Damion Crwaford? And is the answer then to flood the communities with security personnel and hold down crime for how long and in what way? And where is the social intervention, the upliftment of the broad levity of the society that everyone accepts should go along with this? Is it provided for in this budget? Do we see any signs of it in the communities that have been named ZOZO or states of emergency? Big questions. This is Power Talk Live. We soon come. Welcome back to Power Talk Live. We're talking with Opposition Senator Damion Crwaford. He has some thoughts about the criminal justice system. He expressed them in the Senate recently, but not without controversy. Your uncle take you on.
Yeah. My blood uncle, as you said, who I lived with as well. So
Really?
yeah, I lived with him for 4 years.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so
A decent man.
yeah, in my opinion, yes.
Yes. Good lawyer.
Good lawyer, decent man. And you see, what people don't understand, I don't fault a man for having a different opinion. Yeah, because I think we all want the same outcome.
Precisely.
You just have a different opinion from mine, based on
Yeah.
your experiences, based on your associations, based on your outlook.
Yes.
You have a different opinion.
Right.
So, for
He
example,
says you're not balanced.
he suggests that I am not balanced, which means that, which he also agreed that some of what I said was factual.
Right.
And I would say most of what I said, all of what I said was factual. But he feels that these people are being held hostage by the criminals. Which confuses me, because he seems to be suggesting that the solution is to hold them hostage by the government.
Yes, to change it.
It's to change the hostage taker.
Well, but behind that is a presumption that the government is a benign hostage keeper.
Yeah, because he said that,
which unfortunately is not always the case.
Precisely.
He assumes it's a better hostage.
Yes, he contends that the murder rate is down, so he's willing to give up some of his rights, and he believes that you're
No, not his rights.
Yes, because it's unlikely that myself or him will be caught in that net.
Right.
But also,
more likely you, because you're dread.
but they know my face. They know my face. But what is contrary is that the government has not put anything to maintain that situation. They have not put a plan forward to say this is the short-term portion of the plan,
these are the long-term.
and these are the long-term that will cause for it not to be retaken. I remember when I toured Chadiga Park, when the people were told by criminals to leave. Police was facilitating the leaving from Chadiga Park. What have we done to change that possibility again? All right. So therefore, what I said in the speech is that I have not seen anything to suggest that this portion is a necessary precursor to the other portion that we're going to have.
It's a kind of knee-jerk.
Right, it's a knee-jerk.
But isn't this a yawning deficit right now? That we've had, several months of Zozo and coming up with state of emergency. And apart from doing some necessary things, but quite frankly, relatively picayune things like birth certificates and passport and health check. The core economic malady that afflicts people's behavior. For me, it's work.
Education, work. All those things work.
You can take care of your refuse and your housing, etc. I don't see any concerted effort to employ people who idly, if afflicted by idleness and fecklessness, are going to be more prone. Granted, it's only the 0.1%. Yes, but who are going to be more prone to mayhem.
Now, what I've found to be contrary, Ronnie, and a mutually exclusive, or some in academia we say a paradox. What's mutually exclusive is the assumption that crime pays. And then an equal assumption that the criminals are poor. So therefore, if crime pays, I've seen no evidence of that payment in the inner cities. So therefore,
the majority of the criminals are poor.
Who are the ones collecting this payment?
Which brings us to the State Department's International Narcotics Strategy Report, because they contend that we're not holding the big wigs in Jamaica, the big players we're not doing enough to hold them.
Can you expand on that? I don't think our listeners and viewers are fully aware that people from outside, experts, have looked at us and seen that this is a real problem, a gap that we have. Who are these people? What are they saying?
Well, the Americans, the State Department, they are contending that the justice system in Jamaica and the government of Jamaica, they are not doing enough to bring the major players of criminality to book.
Well, let us not forget that in our very recent history, there was great effort by government to protect one of the most known.
Well, they even mentioned that. They never went in detail, but they also talk about the relationship between political leaders and the top criminal leaders.
And that is why I said to Jamaicans this morning, it is impossible for 63 people to lead 2.7 million people astray. The 2.7 million people must therefore agree with the negatives of the 63 people. Because we have now forgiven all for the greatest effort by an elected government to protect. Now, I cannot say PNP is not associated. I'm sure PMP have associations with criminal elements.
Yes.
But I've never seen an equal effort,
So
coordinated effort to protect. And
by people who are now at the pinnacle of leadership in this country, who refuse to acknowledge if they were to say, look here, I made a mistake, and that is past us now, forgive me and let's move on, I could be reconciled.
Despite the heavy social and economic cost to the country.
This cabinet was also in that cabinet.
Yes.
So what I'm trying to say is this. Yes. The public's mindset must change. And the worst thing you can do is for a man to accept his position when his position is bad.
Yes.
For a man to say he's a backdoor boy, even when the front door is open.
Yes.
And because we accept that poverty causes crime, we have not called for anything other than an attack on poverty, meaning poor persons more than the essence or the reality of poverty.
Yes.
So there's a story that was on the news. A fellow went to buy Lasco for his baby on the behest of his girlfriend.
We heard that, yes.
He was detained.
Yes.
We all laughed at it. It's still a national joke. But none of us said, is this fellow in any way deserving of detention? I asked some Jamaicans to ask persons, it's the rankest, darkest, stinkiest place that I've ever seen. Yes?
Where they keep them?
Yes. Generally lockups.
Yes, true.
Right. And you take 1,300 persons, of which you have no evidence that 1,200 are not good people.
Right.
And you now associate them with these negative persons.
And expect them to love you afterwards.
And expect them not to perceive that they are in cahoots with the criminal, that it is us against them.
Yes.
It is Tivoli versus Jamaica. It's Denham Town versus Jamaica. It is Flankers versus Jamaica. Because that is the outcome. When I was at Yulit, they had a thing called ragging. All the first years would be placed in a line. And if one person made a mistake, everybody was punished.
Yes.
And we became closer.
Yes.
And hated everybody else.
Yes.
No, you have now ragged these people.
Precisely.
And caused for them to be less likely to give you information.
Yes. And if you saw the front page story on the Gleaner on Sunday, Jamaicans for Justice.
Yeah, correct. Yes. Was uttering.
Yes.
What I was saying.
Yes.
Was uttering the negative that comes.
Yes.
So what should be done?
Well, we should continue with the police, because to stop the current murder rate is a necessity.
Yes.
Even before we look at solving crime and criminality.
Yes.
To stop the murder rate is a necessity.
Yes.
Because we were at a point.
But isn't that what Senator Braham was saying?
Yes.
Don't watch all the hellhole. Don't watch all the sadness of the Lasco father.
Right.
Just make it go on.
Yes.
Well, I've shown Senator Braham and the nation that there is another situation without emergency powers, meaning in the ZOSO, that have two other variables that have proven to work. The curfew and the influx of security forces. What has been the problem, however, is that the government has then now started to act as a neighborhood watch to claim crime is down in a space, when the government is responsible for all spaces.
All spaces, yes.
So that's a difficulty, because you don't have the resources to go into all spaces. Yeah. So right now, in Augustown, a war is on. Right now, on Maxwell Avenue, I woke up into two deaths in 2 nights coming from UAE.
10 persons were killed in a week.
Right.
Yeah.
But you see, when your aim is more public relations than solutions, then you come and claim, okay, no crime in Montego Bay, and just leave out the fact that we're still almost at the same level that we were before.
Correct.
But what needs to be done is a state of emergency, first of all, need to be placed on the education system. You asked me when we were out, what about the situation where 45 schools called traditional schools have a 74% chance of getting 5 subjects, and 118 schools called non-traditional schools have 13% chance of getting 5 subjects?
Yeah.
On average?
That's really bad.
There was a school that had
needs a state of emergency.
Zero.
A zero.
And we know the reason why that has.
These 1,300 that were detained.
I'd love to talk to you about that one.
How many of them you think were from the 45 schools?
Yes. Very few.
Very few.
Very few.
Yeah.
Very few.
Yeah.
So therefore, and we know that.
Yes.
Because if it is that somebody from Godfrey Stewart gets 7 subjects, he will come on this program because we are surprised.
Yes.
We're not equally surprised when somebody gets 11 subjects from campaign.
Yes,
because
Jamaica college, we expected that, yes.
So therefore
we're talking about some profound cultural change.
Yes.
But we, as a people,
it can't be beyond us, we have to do
it. The drug dealer do very little work because the addicts search him out.
Yes.
We as a people just got to God's throat and don't feel no way about it.
Yes.
We feel that we deserve what we're getting.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons why we have low pay now.
Yes.
Not because of just the glut in labor, but in the acceptance from labor that we should be broke.
Yes.
And the bar should have a boat. So therefore that acceptance calls for no resistance to it.
Yes.
So there's no resistance, even though the Minister of Education will get up and say, education is working.
When we come back from the break, Damion Crwaford, I have to ask him some questions. First of all, he spoke of the issue of political affiliation to certain crime gangs, one particular instance. But what about the party that he and I are connected to? Yes, can he vouch for us? Should we? Yes, and also there's the issue of the excesses of the security forces. That's inherent in all he's talking about. But then he's on record as being extremely critical of Indicom. How does it square?
Yes.
Damion Crwaford with us on Power Talk Live. We'll soon come. Continuing Power Talk Live with Senator Damion Crwaford. Raston Hammond co-hosts this program with me. So, Senator, you mentioned about political connection with crime and influence.
Yes.
And there are many people who would insist that I ask the question, and they would ask it of me too. What is is political interference and cozying up with crime still a factor? And what do we in the People's National Party have to say about this? I've been concerned that this state of emergency in St. Catherine has been going after the Klansman gang.
Yes.
And there is this sense, people may not say it, one newspaper particularly, that, but you know, they're really the PNP people. They're the ones we have to extirpate, have to get rid of.
Yes.
Yeah, I resent that because I don't know it to be true. And if it is true, I want to separate myself. We have to be very, very careful and scrupulous about those things.
For sure, there are certain connections, and there's automatic connections because a political party have very little influence over who supports it, who comes in the
that's
party.
a different thing.
No. What should be the judgment is who's comfortable in the party.
Indeed.
So who comes is almost automatic. John Brown and say, I'm that, I'm that. Now, if that person is facilitated to be comfortable, then that's an issue.
And to be criminal.
And equally criminal. So if he doesn't change and remain comfortable, then the party is equally a criminal party.
Precisely.
Now, what has been the problem is that there has not been sufficient steps, including in the PNP, to ensure that there's little comfort for those who come and remain of that ilk.
There was clearly a whole heap of comfort the other side in Tripoli, but the fact that was so doesn't excuse anything.
No, doesn't.
We have to move beyond that now.
Right.
Correct.
Now, one of the problems we have is the designation of our areas as garrison, which is incorrect in its designation and untrue. A garrison needs weapons for influence. Now, maybe that was so initially, but these people in Tivoli don't need weapons to choose JLP anymore.
Right.
And the people in Pineland don't need weapons to choose Portia Simpson.
That's natural.
Now, to the contrary, we call Texas a red state. We don't call it a garrison. I understand it? And we call California a blue state. And in the same way, we are certain of California vote, and we are certain of Texas vote.
We use more refined definitions.
Yes, it's not an orange community and a green community, but instead it's a garrison, which garrison comes from the army's pool of weapons. So therefore, garrison means that a person have to come with him gun and say, if I'm not PNP, I'm dead. No, that don't exist in Tivoli.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying? So that fabrication have led to people to then feel that there's a hugging up of these criminals. Now, these criminals don't even hug the politicians anymore because they have their own source of income.
Precisely, they are independent.
So that is why you can't even tell them to stop. Because they are now independent. In fact, they're connected with each other. There's JLP criminal and PP criminal working together and not fighting no politics.
Precisely.
War. So if we should be seeking a solution, we must first seek the truth. Which we are unwilling to seek. So I don't know what we're going to do.
Well, it means that we have to be very clear that there is no part in the political process, whether it is directing contracts or seeking to intimidate voters, by persons who seek political leadership in this country.
Yes.
And that has to be a litmus test that people generally apply to everybody.
Yes.
And not on the basis of some aspersion caste, as you point out, but rather, oh, he represents a garrison constituency.
Right.
But rather on the basis of factual analysis.
Yes.
That is the key thing.
Yes.
And evidence on behavior.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Rather
And
than
evidence on
sensationalism.
So I remember when I moved a road down in Bedward Gardens, I was doing a road, some criminals came to say that it can't happen without them.
Yes.
I moved the road to somewhere else.
Yes.
I was on Smile Jamaica being chastised for being afraid.
Yes.
Now, I am afraid. I can't fight these people.
Right.
But I can't expose people to then be shot and said to be a farmer and to be sellout. So I moved the road.
Yes.
The reality is that those actions aren't the ones that are perceived. It is where you get the clocks there.
Yeah.
We have a new clock on the road. And that's why I said to you, that's what, when I speak, Ronnie, you would know, I speak to the voters. I try to change the comfort with the situation, because nothing changes if people are not uncomfortable.
Have you revised your view about Indicom? Because certainly I support Indicom in all of its aspects and in all of the powers that I think were originally intended. Every powerful entity, police, army, government, needs checks and balances.
Indeed.
And we're coming from a tradition of serious abuse by members of the police force.
And even with that said, I've not changed my opinion on Indicom. And a lot of times we find that a disagreement with strategy is perceived to be a disagreement with objective.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case. I might be wanting to go downtown and you say, let's walk. And I say, let's take a taxi.
Yes.
We still want to go downtown, but we have a different opinion of the strategy that should be held.
What's the difference here?
Now, this is what is the problem with Indicom. And I said to my uncle the other day that you can't choose salt to sweeten drinks. So simply because the drinks weren't sweetened, I mustn't resist that you're throwing salt in it. Indicom's performance is either one, that they Indicom are ineffective because they have not arrested a lot of police, or two, that our assumption about the level of malpractice of police are not as extensive as we thought.
Okay.
If it is extensive, then Indicom is ineffective.
Right. Because they should be arresting.
Because they should be
police.
arresting and convicting.
Yeah, if you follow it logically.
If you follow it logically.
Okay.
So
well, yeah, but that's nice and theoretical, but there are very good practical reasons why that doesn't happen.
And equally that the police could have said those existed when they were policing themselves too. So if it
Which
is,
wouldn't prove anything, really.
No, because we have claimed that the police are incapable to police themselves.
Right.
When the same situations existed.
Yes.
And we get us next unit now who have not been
So
more
your
efficient.
job is to do that.
Right.
Yes.
And yet we have excused
No, I don't
them.
think so, because certainly in respect of the perception of the police force and their morale, they have been affected by Indicom, and they should be. And that is their bone of contention against Indicom. Not that Indicom is inefficient or ineffectual, but rather because they have been interfering with their untrammeled posture.
I'm not saying what the police complaint is. I'm saying what the figures have shown.
But it's important to go beyond the figures.
No, let's go to what the police have said.
Yes.
The police have said, like any other human being, that risk reduce intent to act.
Right.
I made that point earlier.
Yeah.
Now, when you have
good.
Good.
Which is good.
No, but not to act negatively, just to act at all. That's what the police are saying. The police are saying that we are in a situation that even when we have done as we should, we have to find money for lawyers.
Yes.
We have to come off the front line.
Yes.
So therefore, what Indicom has done in the system that Indicom have been placed in is to put the police at risk for confronting a criminal. Which
are correctable issues.
Which should be corrected.
Which should be correct.
Right.
So do I understand then that your position is that we ought to be correcting those issues? It's not a question of not having Indicom. It's a question of modifying that risk which is untoward, where a person finds themselves in utter jeopardy while they're considering that they're doing their duty.
But you have said it in another way, because it's not a matter of not having oversight. Indicom is a total system that exists with oversight. This current system that we have is Indicom. Now, I'm saying there should be oversight.
Well, actually, there's more than that.
But not in the way that we have done now.
Okay.
Yes. Well, we do disagree. But the key thing is that you have to, if you do not have stern policing with effective oversight, then you're going to have hopeless breaches of human rights.
Right.
And our experience, our history is so replete with that,
Yes.
that we must be careful, not in our fear and in our paranoia about crime, to want to reverse that.
And I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, that is a,
definitely
I think for our listeners and viewers, that's a useful corrective. So going forward then, look at yourself. I mean, when you speak, you're a figure of controversy. But you're obviously touching base with a number of critical issues.
Yes.
Do you
Driven by data and logics.
Well, this is the whole point.
Yes.
This
Driven
is
by
again,
data
this is
and
why
logics.
we invited you, because you always refer to data and to the logic of the
most important thing. Yes,
which is uniformly absent in
a lot of the conversations taking place.
In a conversation largely dominated by public relations,
sensationalism,
fake news.
Yeah.
Fake news is a real feature in the
More recently, I heard that I'm against the police. But because I said that the state of emergency shouldn't be executed as it is.
Well, but then end on this note with us, because the scope of intervention, of upliftment of vulnerable communities is still wanting.
Yeah, it's not happening.
I've combed the budget this year and I can't find where the money is. And therefore that condign prejudice that exists, the entrenchment of the two Jamaicas.
Yeah. But what does the voters demand?
The voters, this is it. The voters seem to accept that this is some,
as the headline says.
Yeah, not better than that. That's the slogan. Not better than that.
And therefore, the people of St. Catherine glad for the state of emergency.
When they interviewed the lady for the Lasco lady, they said, "So, are you in support of the state of emergency?" Verbatim, she said, "I can't be against it."
Yes.
She said, "What she gonna do? I can't. Who am I to be against it?" Are you understand?
Yeah, the people have accepted it. Not better than that. That's the slogan now.
That the boss must have a ship or a yacht,
not better
and
than
I
that.
must have no pay.
So you as a young politician coming into to this kind of scene and looking towards that kind of fissure and that mental chaos, I have to say, in people's minds. Do you see balm in Gilead?
Well, that's why I've tried to speak discomfort.
To speak discomfort.
Yeah. Whenever I speak, those who are in the position, the poor, must be uncomfortable with their personal situation.
Yes.
And those who are not in the position must be uncomfortable with the systematic situation.
What a note to end on.
To force the change.
Exciting guy, happy to have him. After the break, we'll be joined by Executive Director of the Jamaica Cancer Society, Mrs. Yulit Gordon. We'll be looking at cervical cancer among Jamaican women, another vital topic. Thanks, Senator.
Thank you.
We'll soon come
Thanks
back.
for having me.
We don't skin up on this program, Power Talk Live. We talk about the things that really can make a difference in your life and can move Jamaica forward. So that's why we welcome Mrs. Yulit Gordon, the Executive Director of the Jamaica Cancer Society. Happy to have you, my lady.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Rep.
April is Cervical Cancer Month.
Yes, it is.
What is cervical cancer, Yulit Gordon?
Okay, cervical cancer
Is it cervical? That's the correct pronunciation.
Well, it can be cervical or cervical, depending,
good. I loved yours.
But it is a very serious cancer. It's a cancer that affects all women. It starts in the cervix, which is at the lower,
womb, isn't it?
Yes, the lower part of the uterus, which opens into the opening of the vagina. So that is where the cervix is located. And when the cells within that area start behaving badly, out of control, then cervical cancer starts to develop. Okay. And as you can well appreciate, just by nature of where it is located, it cannot be good for us as women. So it's a very serious cancer, and one that we would like to shine the spotlight on throughout the entire month of April, even though we talk about cervical cancer throughout the entire year. But we see the need to spend an entire month just increasing the level of public awareness about this cancer and to inform the public on what steps, what action is necessary to keep this cancer at bay. Nobody wants to have this one. None of us.
Is it common in Jamaica?
It is very common in Jamaica because it is the leading gynecological cancer, as well as it is the second leading cause of cancer-related deaths among Jamaican women.
First being breast cancer?
First being breast cancer. And based on the statistics, now, bear in mind that we do not have access to all island cancer data.
Okay.
This is just a sample size of the population.
Yes.
And the last statistics show that at least approximately 200 women die from this particular cancer, cervical cancer, annually. Right? So we would shudder to think, what if we had access to all island data, what might that figure be?
Okay. Well, we're going to come back to the question of data, because that is an egregious default of our system right now, where we can't know the full effect or the full
just this whole landscape of cancer. We need to know the status of it in the Jamaican society.
Is it painful? It can kill you?
It can kill you, like all cancers or all chronic diseases can kill you if it's not managed properly.
Okay.
Now, the key message of the Jamaica Cancer, and the message that we want to connect with the Jamaican society, even though it's only us women have cervix, but by nature of Jamaica being a matriarchal society, and based on the stats coming out of the Jamaica Health and Lifestyle Survey that says over 15% of Jamaican households are headed by women, to show the importance of the role of women in the society and the fact that this cancer affects only women. We want to say it's a very dangerous cancer if it is not caught early.
Okay.
So the key thing is to catch cervical cancer in its precancerous stage, meaning there is a simple test, that of the pap smear, which is a preventative tool. The pap smear is not there to diagnose cervical cancer. The pap smear is there to prevent cervical cancer from happening. Now, the national screening guidelines, or certainly screening guidelines mandated by the Jamaica Cancer Society, is that we need to be having our pap smears every year. Okay. Now, if a woman is accessing her pap smear every single year, right, or even if she misses a year, she is still in that safe zone, because the pap test is there to detect abnormalities within the cervix before they get to the cancerous stage. So screening is not a tool to diagnose cancer.
Okay.
Right? The biopsy does that.
Okay.
Screening is supposed to detect abnormalities before cancer develops, and that is why the pap smear is such an important tool.
Yes.
But I believe also we are not having the uptake in this screening exercise, because a lot of women are still not having access to the education around cervical cancer. And why the pap test? What is the pap test, and why is it beneficial for them or for us to get that test done?
Are there a particular age and demographic of women, type of woman, who is most prone, most susceptible to cervical cancer?
Well, the screening guideline starts from age 21 through to age 74. Now, women who are beyond age 74, once they're in good health and they walk into a doctor's office or at the Cancer Society and ask to have the pap smear done, they're not turned away. But that is the target group, 21 to 74 years, right?
Yes.
Now, there is that group, the women from low, and I mean, research has confirmed this, studies has confirmed this, that women from lower socioeconomic status are at higher risk because they don't have access to ongoing health education, access to the tests, right?
Yes.
And also the fact that there is that fear factor, which I think goes beyond those women living in lower socioeconomic background. But fear is a significant barrier, and then there's a cost to access the test, which the Jamaica Cancer Society tries to remove the barrier of cost by getting grants that we can go out into those underserved and rural communities and take the pap smear screening to these women.
Okay, right? What's the fear? The fear of knowing?
The fear of the actual test. Okay. Again, this is where education comes in,
yes,
so that they understand that the test is very quick. It is for most women, it is not painful.
Yes.
Some women do experience some level of discomfort, and we respect that.
Okay.
So we address the fear factor by having women who do their test regularly give their testimonial. Cervical cancer survivors also giving their testimonial. But fear is a significant barrier. Fear of the test, fear of knowing that you have cervical cancer.
Wasn't there a program recently to sensitize schoolgirls?
Yes. Well, the main risk factor for cervical cancer is the HPV virus, the human papilloma virus. That's the main risk factor. And that is responsible for approximately 70% of all cervical cancer cases globally, right? There's the other 30% that is linked to risk factors such as smoking, a weakened immune system, right? As well as women from lower socioeconomic is a risk factor, status is a risk factor, but there's also studies have suggested that women who have been on oral contraceptives for many, many years, women who start having children from early, are at increased risk. But the human papilloma virus is responsible for the majority of cervical cancer cases globally. Now, in 2006, the FDA approved 2 vaccines that will seek to address that. Yes, that is the Cervarix as well as Gardasil. And this is recommended for boys and girls from ages 9 through to age 26 years of age to get this vaccine, because the efficacy of the vaccine is best before the exposure to the HPV virus, which is the most common sexually transmitted virus. Right? There are 2 strains of the HPV, which is, you have over 150 strains of the virus, HPV. But the 2 strains that are responsible for the cervical cancer cases are type 16 and 18. And the Cervarix, which the government has introduced into the high schools, is primarily responsible for addressing the type 16 and 18, the 2 types responsible for cervical cancer.
Why boys?
Boys, because boys are also carriers of HPV virus.
Transmitted to the girls.
And it's transmitted through sexual intercourse from the boys to the girls. Also, the boys are at risk. Whilst they are not at risk for cervical cancer, the boys are at risk for penile cancer, anal cancer, throat cancer.
From the same virus?
From the same HPV virus. The boys are at risk for penile cancer, anal cancer, and the oropharynx cancer, which covers the tongue and the throat, because a lot of the millennials now are engaged in oral sex from early, and therefore once they're exposed to the HPV virus now, for some of them, if they have strong immune system, then some of the strains will go away on their own.
Yes.
Whilst others now, persons who smoke, persons who have a weakened immune system, it will stay there. It will not go away on its own. And therefore, the vaccine is extremely important. Again, we did not have the uptake. The ministry did not have the uptake because of the absence of a robust education program and health promotion to educate the teachers, educate the parents.
There should be no resistance. There should be an encouragement for this to be available to everyone, everywhere. It's a reasonable precaution against what can be a fatal disease.
Absolutely. And when you look at the pattern or the experience of those developed countries that have, because remember, it has been around now from, one is 2004, the other is 2006. And most developed countries, the USA, Canada, the Nordic countries, they have implemented national HPV vaccination programs. Over 200 million doses have already been disseminated among young girls and boys between ages 9 and 13 years of age, right? And those countries recorded cervical cancer incidence in single digits.
Look at that.
In single digit. Mark you still need more time to see a significant decline in cervical cancer cases, because 10 years is not enough.
But it's going in the right direction.
But it's going in the right direction. They're setting the foundation for in another decade or two, they probably have 0 cervical cancer cases.
So when we come back from the break, Mrs. Yulit Gordon, let us discuss why with this resistance. Please, parents listening to us, teachers, accepting the vaccination against the human papillomavirus does not mean that your child is going to become promiscuous. It has no ill effect. No. It is a protection against an eventuality which can take their life, can compromise their existence. So why not agree? We want a renewal of the effort by the Ministry of Health and others.
Yes.
But then there's the other issue, you know, because the universal screening for cervical cancer needs to be a priority for the Jamaican healthcare system. Do you think?
Yes.
More when we come back. This is Power Talk Live. Thanks for being with us on Power Talk Live on JNN and Power 106, talking with Mrs. Yulit Gordon, Executive Director of the Jamaica Cancer Society. So, do we have universal screening for cervical cancer in Jamaica, and should we if we don't?
Yes, we do not have national screening programs, and we need to get to that stage if we're really serious about ridding our society of cancer, and certainly those cancers that are preventable. We need to embark on national screening program.
Tell me
and
about
an effective national screening program needs to be widely accessible by the majority of the population, and certainly that target population that needs it, okay? It needs to be safe, it needs to be affordable. The follow-up systems must be in place. So when we go on a national pap smear screening program and we find, say, 10% of the target population coming back with abnormal results, it means that these women must be enrolled in the appropriate follow-up treatment programs. Colposcopy, biopsies need to be done, who needs to access surgery in a timely and efficient manner in order to see the returns on these important interventions. Right now as a society, I think it is safe to say that we are screening below 20% of the target population.
Below 20%.
Safe to say that.
Yes.
I would say that we are screening possibly maybe 50,000 women, certainly under 100,000 women, right? Annually. The number of women that needs to be screened in that target group is anywhere between 350,000 to 500,000 women, right? So we would like to see us as a society combined, the Jamaica Cancer Society, the efforts of the Ministry of Health, the efforts in the private health institutions, to be screening at least 350,000 women annually in order to make a dent in the incidence and the mortality as reported.
Who should lead that process?
I believe the Ministry of Health should be the leader of this charge, and supported by the Jamaica Cancer Society and the Medical Association of Jamaica and the other private practitioners. But we need to get to that state, because when you look at cervical cancer, which is the most preventable cancer, to report that almost 200 women are dying, and women in their most productive years. It's not good enough, Jamaica. It is just not good enough, right?
Every church should be encouraging their women in the appropriate age bracket to be tested. Every political party, every service club, every professional group. We need to start from there with the pressure. But I don't think that if done on a universal basis, that you would find the cost prohibitive for the government. And there must be a window for those who genuinely can't afford it. The Cancer Society can tell you how to do it, Rasan. So that's the target area that they're going for. But it simply is an effort that needs to be multiplied with obvious, palpable solutions, such as you've told us are already evident in other countries.
Absolutely, because remember, we're not screening to find cancer, We're screening to find those abnormal cells
That
before they develop into cancer.
Yes.
And I think we all by now have embraced and accepted that it costs millions of dollars to treat.
Yes.
If we can avert getting to the treatment stage,
yes,
right, and remain in the preventative scope, then we're also saving the government millions of dollars to pay to treat the cancer when it is diagnosed.
Yes.
Is it a cultural problem or a financial problem, do you think, or some combination?
I think it's a combination of issues, because what we're mandating during this month is to have an uptake on our outreach program. So we're appealing to the churches, the schools, the workplaces, the community groups to invite the Jamaica Cancer Society to come to your places of work or play, so that we can take,
places, right.
because it's like you're just moving on. It's like you have a clinic on wheels, you know,
yes.
and you're moving the doctor's office. When you go to the doctor's office, you go behind a screen and you get the test done. It's not longer than 5 minutes, and then you have to commute. When you look at a lot of women in corporate Jamaica will tell you, oh, they can't make the time from their busy schedules. The thought of commuting from the workplace to go to the doctor's office becomes a barrier.
Yes.
They get to the doctor's office, the doctor may have some emergency. That's the life of a doctor.
Yes.
And therefore now the appointment is now pushed back. So you have these various barriers that you have to get past in order to get to the actual test. And the Jamaica Cancer Society is saying, please allow us to remove all these barriers and get the service to you. We will come to you. We have a very, very active outreach team. As a matter of fact, we provide over 10,000 pap smears each year, and 2,000 of that is coming from just outreach activities alone. And we can do more because the Jamaica Cancer Society has been blessed with our own cytology lab, which is staffed by 2 highly trained cytotechnologists. So we get the results back in the hands of the customers within, depending on workload, of course, within 15 to 20 working days, which is a big improvement, and in some cases almost the same turnaround time as you do within the private sector, right? So we can do more, but we need more support from these various agencies to enable us to change the outcome for so many Jamaican women.
Let's make sure that we debunk all of the prejudices. There is a feeling that some people express, that others feel that if is bad living cause cervical cancer. Is true?
No, not at all. Okay, the main risk factors: the human papilloma virus, which is a sexually transmitted infection.
But that can be transmitted in perfectly normal mature circumstances.
Normal relationships. It can be, because it is such a very common infection out there that the research has confirmed that most individuals who are sexually active will at some point in time get 1 or 2 of the strains of the virus. So it's not because you're living careless living, right? Also, a weakened immune system is not only experienced because of HPV or HIV. A weakened immune system can come from being on certain drugs, certain medication that you have to use to manage pre-existing conditions, right? As well as smoking weakens your immune system and make you more susceptible to all sorts of infections. Infections that go untreated also weakens your immune system. So it is not an indicator. A woman being diagnosed with cervical cancer is not because she's careless,
done anything wrong,
or she is a sinner. Nothing like that. All women are at risk for cervical cancer because we all have a cervix.
There is another shibboleth, and it is that boy, yes, it should really get tested and so on, but if I have cancer, I can't do nothing, I'm just going dead. Is cervical cancer prone to treatment? Is it a death sentence, or can it be cured?
Cervical cancer is not a death sentence. Cervical cancer, if caught in its early stages, can be treated effectively and can be cured. It is treatable, it is curable. But early detection is the key. Early detection. And remember again, listeners and viewers, we are not screening to find cancer. Screening is a preventative tool. It is not a diagnosis tool. It is a preventative tool, and one which, when used as recommended, is going to deliver on favorable results.
Okay. You know, Rastan, it seems to me that while this is principally a women's issue,
yes,
men have a very important role
to play.
Yes.
Yes.
My wife, I must insist and encourage to have her test done
yes,
on a regular basis.
Yes.
Yes.
My daughters,
yes, yes,
all the ladies in my life,
yes,
yes,
and encourage them,
yes,
yes,
not to try and hide, not to let indifference or fear
yes,
affect them,
yes,
but to insist.
yes,
And that
yes,
is something, that is a kind of virtuous
yes,
element of relationship that we want to really put forward.
Correct.
Based on what
Absolutely.
Yulit Gordon has told us today.
Absolutely, because you know, bearing in mind that, you know, these are mothers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Women are being diagnosed in their most productive
Yes,
years.
it's a national
most
issue,
prevalent
yes,
between ages 35 through to ages 55.
Right.
That's your most productive
years.
years.
Sure.
These are mothers,
Yes,
right? And therefore, we encourage the fathers out there, the sons.
Yes.
We have a lot of adult sons,
yes,
you know, to encourage the women in your lives to go out, maybe even follow them. And I will say, Reverend, that on cervical cancer awareness at the Jamaica Cancer Society, we see a lot of men coming with their
Oh, is that
wives.
nice? That's good.
Right? We
That's
see a lot
right.
of men coming,
Come with your
just
partner.
like in prostate
Yeah,
cancer
I was just
awareness
going to
month.
say that, yeah.
You see the
The women
women
come with the
holding
men,
the men's
yes, yes,
hands
yes.
because they're afraid
Yes.
themselves.
Yes.
And you have that symbiotic relationship,
yes, yes,
you know, each one helping the other. So you have raised a very good
Yeah.
point.
And the
there.
bottom line beyond that is we really have to reach out to our Minister of Health,
yes,
Dr. Tufton, and ask him to please address this matter. We need universal screening. It will cost us a few $100 million. It has to be embedded in the primary health care system, and it must become a normative thing
yes,
that you
Yes.
that for a woman to have available. If there's a contribution necessary, let those who can make it, but
Yes.
those who cannot ought to be able to get the service. It is an investment rather than an expenditure.
Absolutely.
Yes, very important. Thank you, Miss. This is very important.
Yeah.
We would like on this program to invite the Cancer Society. So important is your work. Whenever we can offer you a pew for public education, we need to do that.
Thank you very much. Thank
Yes.
you. We really, really
Thank you for all
appreciate
you
it.
and all those who have given their time and their life to
Yes.
the awareness of and the removal of fear from,
Yes.
Yes.
and the preservation of our best lives from the scourge of cancer.
Cancer.
Absolutely.
Yulit Gordon, Executive Director of the
you.
Jamaica Cancer Society,
Pleasure.
who ends our program for today. We love the constructive ways we can use public discussion, you know. Yes?
Yes.
Thanks very much to our guests, to my co-host Rastan Hammond, and to you, our listeners and viewers on Power 106 and JNN. And also to our editorial and production teams who support us so well. Will you join us next time when we get to the heart of things and discuss those issues that affect you and the well-being of our country? And remember, Power Talk does continue on Power 106 after the midday news. Until next time, Ronald Thwaites and Rastan Hammond signing out. Thank you.
Living in the positive, and I know good will conquer evil. Living in the positive.